preparedness. So this is an excerpt from my instructor manual of what I teach instructors to do quick snapshot assessments of the water before they get on it. And this information is also used for them to create a briefing for their students, because we, as guides, we have to brief our students. It's a Transport Canada requirement. We have to tell them what to expect, where we're going, hazards, and how to communicate with each other. But before I jump into this, does anybody have any questions you want to jump in with? Or do you want to just me to keep talking? If you have a question, unmute yourself, give it a couple seconds here, and put that information out there. Wendy's World. Sorry, Wendy, I just saw your yes, but I don't know what it pertains to. Sorry. Okay, no questions. I'll keep the chat box open. Okay, so this worksheet here, or this document that we're looking at now, conditional assessment and decision-making tools. So risk assessment is a huge component of paddling. We do it every day when we're standing at the water and looking at it and going, oh, it's wavy there, I'm going over here. We're assessing the risks. We're looking at the hazards, understanding how the hazards affect us, and then mitigating the risks around those hazards as much as possible. So one of the examples I use often, especially in the Jericho area, is you have a whole series of rocks close to the one launch. You know, so the rocks are the hazard. The risk of the rocks is we run into them, they damage equipment, we bang into them and hurt ourselves. We mitigate the hazard and the risk by not getting close to them. So we always kind of think of, or I always think of, hazard, risk, and mitigation. Just because there's a big hazard, if we can mitigate it, we're good to go. In the Jericho area, again, I'm using that a lot because I'm just super familiar with it. It could be in a basic lesson or introductory lesson, we want fairly low winds and flat water. That's very rarely the case there, especially midday. So wind is the risk. Wind and waves are the hazard. The risk of them is they knock us off the boards or they blow us backwards and we go somewhere we don't want to go. How we mitigate them there is we try to tuck in behind the pier to get out of the wind. So we can work with hazards and the risks of the hazards by finding ways to mitigate them. And then if we can mitigate them, you know, then we're good to go. Just because there's a big hazard doesn't mean that it's a no-go. The quickest assessment that we work through is 4 W's: wind, water, waves, and weather. With wind, we're looking at what's going on with the wind. Is it expected to change? If so, how? And how's that going to affect me? And does that change my paddle plans today? So we have to be aware of the wind. Water, with water, we're looking at temperature. So more often than not, we're looking at temperature, especially this time of year. It's up to about 15 degrees. A week and a half ago, it was 10. So 10's cold. If you're going to spend a lot of time in 10 degrees, you got to be prepared for it. 15 degrees, you still have to be prepared for it if it's an overcast day. But on a sunny day like today, maybe you can warm up easier. So with water, we're looking at temperature. We're looking at potentially cleanliness. You know, if you're going out at Kitts or False Creek, you don't want to drink that water. You don't want to drink any water, but maybe we have E. coli warnings. So are there water quality issues? And then we can also be looking at tides with that. Waves, are there waves? You know, how are waves going to impact us? Are they going to be big? Are there going to be no waves? Are the waves coming in a certain direction because the wind is creating them? So we need to be aware of what to expect with waves while we're out there, if they're going to change with the wind, and how are they going to affect our outing while we're out there. And then weather, we have to be aware of, are there lightning storms forecast? This is more of an Ontario thing. Is there rain in the forecast? Because if there's rain, we have to dress for it. We have to wear raincoats over top of our wetsuits, or we have to have something that's going to give us a wind and rain break to keep our body warm and dry. And cloud cover. Again, cloud cover. I use cloud cover a lot. So we are always looking at those 4 W's as our quick assessment as to what to expect when we're out there. And then it gives us an idea of what to tell the folks that we're going to be out there with, what they can expect. A couple of resources here, so I'll send you this doc too for your own comparison, curiosity. Windy, I use a lot. Environment Canada, marine weather. We want to look at that on bigger trips with exposed and semi-exposed coastlines. Tides, we need to be aware of tides, and beach water quality for, kind of the urban paddling that we do around the city. So what I do in my courses is I get folks to fill out a template. So where's my template? Oops. Let's pretend these numbers aren't here. So I try to get everyone used to working through a decision-making process by filling out this template. So the first thing we look at is wind. With our wind, we want to look at the forecast. I have some examples filled out. I just wanted this one blank. We look at the forecast and decide, or look and to see what is the wind going to be. Are there wind speed changes? And are there wind direction changes? And if there are, we write them down so that we have an idea of what to expect during the day. I want to know wind speed. I want to know the direction it's coming from. I want to know the air temp because I want to know, are we going to warm up if we get wet? And I want to know the cloud cover. So if there's no cloud cover, we need a lot of water and sunscreen and hats. If there's a lot of cloud cover, chances are we're putting on wetsuits because if we get wet, we're going to get cold. For water, I want sea temp. I want, is it clean or not? Is there E. coli warnings? And what are our tides so that we know landing and coming back? For waves, you can get forecasts for waves, but I generally just look at the winds and make my own best guess as to what am I going to expect based on what I'm seeing in the chart above for waves. Write that down. And then weather, if there's anything else that we need to consider, we write that down. And then we start looking at how to, or recommended exposure gear. So recommended exposure gear is kind of our first decision point of looking at all this information to paint a picture of what to expect while we're out there. Then we're making our recommendation to ourselves and others as to what we need to wear. And then we're creating a paddle plan. Paddle plan is going to be paddle into the wind first and take the ride home. Or we're going to go here because we can catch a windbreak, then we're going to go there and we're going to make this route all the way around. And it's going to be wavy, so we're going to be in wetsuits. So we can start putting this together. So again, this template is to help folks walk through a decision-making process so they can make really these two decisions. So a sample might be 5 a.m. winds 5 knots out of the north, gusting at 6. Air temps 12, cloud covers 18%. 8 a.m. it's picked up to 7. It's moved around to the west. 11 a.m. it's picked up to 8, so not much, still out of the west, and it's staying out of the west for the rest of the day. It's dropping around 5. So we know that we're going to have, that's not a bad wind. So 5 knots is 10 kilometers-ish with a 12-kilometer gust. At the height of the day, or the height of the speed here, we're going to see 16 kilometer-hour winds and 24-kilometer-hour gusts. So it's going to be windy here out of the west. Air temp isn't super warm, and cloud cover, we're getting some sun because there's not a lot of cloud cover, so that's good. Sea temp's 15, quality's okay, and then our tides. So we have a high at 2:56 a.m. and the next high is at 6:38 p.m. So, and we have a 4.17 meter tide early in the morning, and then at 6:30 we have a 4.3 meter tide. So we have that picture. Waves, we might get some waves, especially here. We're going to get some chop probably out of the west because we know if we're in Jericho, we have a big fetch there coming out of the west. But at 8 knots, it's not going to be too bad. So we'll have chop, we'd call it. Minimal cloud cover, no rains or storm expected. So wetsuits or some sort of exposure gear is still recommended because it's not super warm outside. It's about the same sea temp as it is the outdoor temp, which means that even though it might be a bit sunny, we're not going to warm up from the air around us. So we have to be dressed if we get wet to be able to be insulated. And paddle plan, it would 100% be paddle west first, and take the free ride home, because it's going to be west all day long, because we're going to be paddling, say, early in the morning. So decision-making process, that's where this helps us just kind of walk through it. And there's another scenario here, 15 degrees, 80% cloud cover, 90% cloud cover, cool temps, maybe 20 in the afternoon, substantial winds, 15 knots, 20 knots. We're definitely going to see waves, minimal cloud cover, no rain, or sorry, lots of cloud cover, that should say. But no rain storms expected. Definitely we need wetsuits. We need some sort of cold water gear. We're going to want booties. Probably might need a toque, because it's not super warm. It's really windy, and chances of going in are high if we're new. So we need to dress for getting wet. So that's a template that I use for preparedness. So we're taking all the things we've talked about. We've taken, in the workshop, the slides part, we talked about things that make waves, considerations about wind, how that affects us on land, how it affects us around contours. So all of this preparedness is looking at my knowledge of the area. Maybe that's from Google Maps, or maybe it's from talking to somebody who paddles the area. My knowledge of what the forecast is saying, or maybe my knowledge of what actually has happened the last couple of days, and then applying, what are we expecting based on that winds that we see, for wind waves, knowing what we know about wind waves now. Are they going to be created? Are they going to be big because the fetch is long? Are they going to be small because it's an offshore breeze, but now we have to consider something else? So we can start really crafting a picture and an understanding of what we're doing. And if we have this done at the beginning of the day, even if it's in our head and some notes jotted down, we're going to be noticing through the days, like, oh, yep, here comes the wind change. I knew that was happening. It's time to turn around. So we can really start keeping ourselves safe by having our routes planned. Even on a short morning trip, this can come into play, especially if the conditions are expected to be really dynamic. All right, so that's the preparedness part I wanted to chat about. Let's look at tide times. So we saw a picture of this. This is just a cool one to look at. There we go. So we got tides. So this is tide times for Vancouver. Let's back up a tiny bit and look at the map. So before, I had to filter down to Vancouver, but if we go to the main page, what we see is a map, and the website's smart enough to kind of know from my computer what area I live in. So it's giving me this map here. Every place there's a dot or one of these little graphics, there is a tide report. So if we are going up Indian Arm, the closest we can get tide report is Bunsen Lake. Once we're at the top, we don't have anything local. We don't have tide reports for, in here on this side of Bowen. We have Gibson between Latona Beach, I don't even know where that is, and Squamish, there's nothing. So if we're paddling in these areas, we're going to be picking one of these to give us an idea as to what are the tides going to be in that area. There are calculations that we can do based on our starting point of a tide station. And then we can do calculations based on trying to find or identifying new locations based on those tide stations. But that's beyond what I want to talk about here and beyond even the course that I teach. So we can work from tables and figure out what the actual tides are going to be in different areas. But for us, it's enough to pick the closest one and then click on that. So this is our False Creek one. This one here is the Vancouver. Let me get down there, Vancouver. So when I click there, it takes me to Vancouver tide. I also just go to Google and search for tides in Vancouver, and it pulls me right to this page. If I want to flip to any one of those other stations, I can click on Google, or I can click on the city here. Oh, no, I have to do it on the actual web page. There we go. And then I can flip back and forth between them as well. Oh, it's not showing. Yeah, so if I click in this area, it gives me a drop-down box and I can flip back and forth with those stations. So again, this is what we saw before. If I click on any of these dates, it expands it so it's easier to look at. You can see here right now on that Vancouver station, which is basically right under the Lionsgate Bridge. We're just past, we're just turning past the high tide. So 4.3 meters, so it's a pretty high one. It was at 6:38. We're on our way to a low, a very high low at 11:13 of 3.6 meters. So not a big difference in water. And then we have our sun phases, we have moon phases, we have wind direction, and um, highs, lows. So a lot of information right here. That's super handy. Easy to find there. Public beach information. So this is a website that was on the preparedness sheet. You can come here, and this is going to tell you water quality reports. So you can find, your closest location. Here they're showing green. If they're gray, it means they don't test it. But you'll find reds here for anything that's closed if you're worried about, or if you've heard about bacteria in the water. And Jericho Sailing Center, huge resource. This is giving you under the weather drop down, you can go to the live webcam and see what does it look like right now. So you can see some texture on the water, you see some people walking around, not a lot of traffic. Here you can see, you get a great example of, see all that texture on the water here? Where's my pointer? Come on, pointer. Anyway, I don't know how I lost it. Okay, so, but here you can see where the water is wavy in the upper left-hand corner, and on the right side of the pier, it's flat. Perfect example of a wind shadow based on that land formation. So this guaranteed is a westerly because it's choppy up to the pier, and then we get a flat spot. It's not too, a lot of boats going out. Not too windy because that flat spot's pretty big. And the tide's really high, so that 4.3 takes us almost to the bottom of the pier. So if we go, and we can see that right now the wind is at 6.1 knots, so that's actual. The webcam, or sorry, the conditions. Wind speed, actual wind speed right now, 7. Direction, almost directly out of the west. 10-minute average, 6.1. And we can see the overall trend. So wind speed trends from 2 p.m. to now, and then the wind direction trend has been consistent out of the west. So it gives us a lot of really good information, of real-time information. So a huge resource. And then if we go to the marine weather forecast, this one is super handy. Right now we're in British Columbia area. It's divided into different segments. Anywhere there's red right now, there is a wind warning. So if I scroll up, you can see red is warning, yellow's watch, advisory, and then no warning at all. So here in the summer, it's pretty common. This is Howe Sound, that's in red. So it's pretty common to have Howe Sound have wind warnings. That's just summer in Howe Sound. But what we can do is from here, if I click in this area here, it's going to take me to a more granular look, and this is south of Nanaimo. So this is catching this whole area here. From this map, all these little red dots are actual buoys that are in the water. So I can click on any one of these and get real-time data. So that marker there, Halibut Bank, buoy number 46146, is measuring 4 knots out of the west, gusting at 4. A wave height, so that difference between the crest and the trough, is 0.15 meters. Wave period, the distance between the waves, is 6.1 meters, so very gentle. Pressure is dropping, air temperature is 19, water temperature is, wow, 19 through there. So we can click on the different markers and get real-time data as to what's happening right there. So hugely valuable if we're going to be paddling up in Howe Sound. We can also, at the top, that's weather conditions. We can go past 24 hours and get actual data of the history. So we can see the trends of what's been going on. And we can go to our regional summary. But we also have forecast. So forecast, white, wind light except northwest 15 knots near Vancouver Island Thursday. Thursday morning, wind becoming southwest 15 Thursday morning. So it's giving us not as nearly a granular forecast as some of the, by looking at data on windy or something, but it's giving us a high level what to expect. And then if I back up from there, we can go to, we can go right down to BC again. And if we were going to be actually going up in house sound, we would click on house sound. And here we have our wind warning, strong wind warning in effect. Wind southerly inflow 10 knots. So inflow is blowing up the sound, outflow is blowing out of the sound, down the sound. 10 knots except southwesterly inflow 20 over northern section. So that's a lot of wind. So we can get all of these details here, and then again, we can go to our markers, our buoys, and get the actual real-time data. So the Environment Canada website is going to be much more valuable when we're out in those really big exposed areas. If you have a VHF radio, VHF radios have weather channels on them. They are going to have on repeat the Environment Canada weather forecast. So if we don't have data, we can often pick it up on VHF radio. And lastly, let's look at Windy. So Windy's kind of my go-to app. It's the one I know the best. So this is the desktop version. It has tides on it. It has all the data that I use. And I can pull all the data from it that I used on my preparedness worksheet. So it has cloud cover, it has tide reports, it has sea temp, it has air temp, it has all the reports. We just have to filter through the information that's here to find it. So by zooming back here, I have my tides turned on. So each one of these little dots is a tide station. And if I mouse over it, it tells me the name of the station. So this is Blind Bay, British Columbia, and it tells me the highs and the lows in that area. Surprisingly enough, as we start looking at the different stations, even though they appear close, tides will be different. So this is Point Atkinson, so Lighthouse Park. High tide 6:34. In Vancouver, 7:19. Oh, sorry, no. First narrow 7:19. That's not right. Sorry, that was current. 6:34 at Point Atkinson. Vancouver 6:53. Let's go to Port Moody 7:06. So you can see the high and low tide differences just in this difference of land or this difference of distance. We're seeing a big difference. So when we're out choosing where to paddle, we want to grab the closest one to us, because you can see there are differences because that water has to move gradually as it's coming in and out, and we're going to see big differences depending on location. So to turn that on, what I've done is I've gone to menu, this hamburger here, and the desktop version has all these nice pretty little icons that take up a ton of space. They used to have a search bar. Oh, that's right there, search layer. So you can search through them to find them quick. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, the constant display on map is where I've turned on tide forecast. So I've clicked this, so it's always on my map. You can have always reported wind on the map, but I prefer to leave my tides on. And then I use the layers up here to pick my other options. So I can pick wind, corresponding here it lights up, wind gust. What else do I use? Temperature. I use, where is it? Cloud cover, or clouds. Yeah, I use clouds. So that's in percentage. So it gives me my cloud cover. And then sea temp is right here. So I can go back and forth between these ones to find data based on the dropped pin. So again, I turn on my tides down here so they're always on and easy to access. And on the desktop version, I have the more popular ones lit up here, and I can pick between them. So this pin, if I drop a pin here right outside of the sailing center, it is telling me that sea temp is 15 degrees Celsius. If I click on wind, it's telling me current wind speed is 13 knots northwest, or this is the forecast, sorry. And waves, there's a wave report I can get, says 0.2 meters out of the west. If I click the down arrow, I get my big forecast screen at the bottom. And you have options here. If you click basic, you get the basic. So you get temperature. So this is air temperature, rain in millimeters, wind gusts, and wind direction. So I almost always leave mine on wave and tides so that I get, the amount of sun. So I'm getting an idea, is it sun or cloud cover? I'm getting outdoor temperature. I'm getting wind gusts directly underneath it. Potential for waves, the direction on them with a little arrow that's pointing. And I get my tides across the bottom. They're not showing here for some reason, but they should be across here. I don't know why they're not there. And I have the paid version, Jessica. So are you going to show the Windy app, Drew? So no, Wendy, sorry, no. I just have the desktop version. I don't have a way to do a screen sharing. I didn't set up a way to do my screen sharing on my phone. Similar though, but with the Windy app or the app itself, you have to have the paid version to be able to show tides. So all those tide stations that are showing on mine, you do need the paid version. If you don't have the paid version and you select waves and tide here on the app on the phone or your iPad, it'll be grayed out and just say paid version, but you'll get everything else. You'll get wind and all the other information. Sorry, I meant free or paid version of Windy. Yeah. So I have the paid version, Jessica. So I think it's like 25 bucks a year. If you're going to be paddling a lot, it's one of those things that I would recommend grabbing. It also updates the information more often. So the free version, I think, is 4 times a day. I don't know what the actual difference in how often it updates, but you're getting more current information in the paid version because it's pulling new data in more often as opposed to, big segments. And how this works is I figured you would need paid version on sale. Yes, for sure, Wendy. $25 per year is not bad for all this info. Yeah, exactly, Beth. Because once you start looking at it, you'll never go back to anything else. You'll always use Windy because there is so much information at your fingertips. And here, it's hard to see, but when I have wave and tide selected, I can move at 7 o'clock, I can move the time scale to Thursday to Friday to get my forecasts. And up here, what you're seeing is the pin that I dropped. I have the information that corresponds to it. But here, this is showing me the swell forecast. So it's showing me direction and telling me 0.2 meters, swell 2, and wind. So it's showing me how wind and the expected waves are moving around. The angle of that indicator is telling the angle that it's coming at. So it's northwest or almost north here for the wind as I slide my time back and forth. So when I'm doing my preparedness worksheet, I come to Windy, I click the little down arrow to get this sheet here, and I've got my trends, my winds, my speed, everything right here. What I don't have is cloud cover. So I go to cloud cover, I click cloud cover over here on the right. If it's not there, I would click my hamburger and search for it here and find clouds and click for it here. Or click it here. And then what I would do, and you notice the way I have it set up is I have the little streaming indicators showing you wind direction, and the intensity will depend, the greater the intensity, the longer the tail. So if you zoom in on this, I can drop a pin just to say the area that I'm in. And right now it's saying my cloud cover is 0% expected Thursday at 9 a.m. And if I scroll this over, that's going to update. So looks like clear day tomorrow, no cloud cover. So for the time I'm paddling, to figure out my cloud cover for my preparedness, I would come to windy, click clouds, drop my pin in the area I'm going to be in, and then just scroll through the day and look for changes. And then I would do the same for wind, or no, with wind, I do this. And then for tides, I would zoom back until I found my closest tide station and grab my tide there. So everything is at your fingertips quite readily. You know, other options we have at the bottom, so I look at wave and tides the most, but you can select wind, and that just changes the data. So here it's giving us much more fine-tuned wind, and it's also giving it across multiple models. So the default model is the ECMWF, or MWF. It's the Environment Canada weather model. So there's different models that forecast, that can be used to forecast weather. I'm not an expert by any means. I've read what they are and promptly forgot it all. I just leave it on Environment Canada. But you can select the different models here to see what data they are giving you. But if you select wind here, these little arrows move from wind and swell to the different models. So you can see the difference for this one time frame, 11 p.m., that the different models are forecasting slightly different directions and speeds. So that's kind of cool, especially if you really like data, to know what's there. But you know, it's also kind of interesting to go to an area, see what's actually happening, look at the forecast, and maybe get an idea of the model that's most accurate. So I don't really look at that level for most of the paddling that I do, especially in the lessons. I don't need more than granular. But it's kind of neat, the idea that you can start maybe picking and choosing which model gives more interesting forecasts or reliable forecasts in other different areas or conditions. So it's all at your fingertips. The challenge with windy is to not get overwhelmed. Look at our options. People use this for aviation. People use this for marine. People use this for land. People use windy for all sorts of different things. So there is more information here than we need. So ignore what you don't know what it is. Check things out of curiosity, but pick and choose what you know you need. And your original guide can be the preparedness template that I created that says, this is giving you your best snapshot to start. That's going to serve you for most of your urban paddling. When we start looking at longer trip paddling, then we might look at a bit more granular level, or we're going to be looking at probably different resources as well. We'll be looking at the marine weather forecast and tides, and then just taking what comes at us to a degree. There are several wind forecast models. Oh, yep. How do you make decisions when they can be quite different? Yeah, Linda. So that's the trick. So mine is to leave it on Environment Canada. Read up on them, try them. If one just is reliably letting you down, try a different one. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately. This is pretty much what I wanted to cover, and we're 10 to 8. So if you haven't eaten dinner yet, you're probably really hungry.